The Magnolia Restaurant was a place of contrasts. Located in the heart of a southern U.S. town, it was famous for its lavish decor, inspired by the region's historic mansions. The restaurant was a symbol of a divided city. In the main dining area, politicians and business tycoons conducted deals over expensive meals. Behind the scenes, hard-working staff, predominantly black, kept the place running, though they were rarely acknowledged. Alicia Harper, a 24-year-old waitress, was one of those invisible faces. With long braids and an upright posture, she moved gracefully through the dining area, knowing every inch of the space. Despite her calm demeanor, Alicia carried a heavy burden. From a young age, she had dreamed of becoming a pianist. Her talent was undeniable. She had perfect pitch and composed music that could move even the hardest hearts. But reality painted a different picture. She worked as a waitress to support her sick mother and younger brother. That evening, the restaurant was especially busy. Among the patrons was Harrison Vaughn, a multimillionaire businessman seated at his usual table. Known for his arrogance and prejudices, Harrison was the kind of customer the staff dreaded serving. He wielded his power like a weapon, always ready to humiliate those he deemed beneath him. The night seemed ordinary until Harrison, watching Alicia as she carried trays, decided to entertain himself at her expense. "Waitress," he called, his voice sharp and commanding. Alicia stopped, adjusting her professional smile. "Yes, sir. How can I help you? You look out of place here," he began, his tone as cutting as a blade. "Are you always this serious? Don't you know how to smile?" She remained calm. "I'm sorry if I seem too serious, sir. I'll make sure to smile more." Harrison chuckled, but there was no humor in his gaze. "Oh, look at that. I heard this place has a piano, and you seem like the church-going type. How about giving us a little show? We need some entertainment." The humiliation was palpable. The dining room fell silent, all eyes on Alicia. Some patrons chuckled softly, while others looked away uncomfortable. Alicia took a deep breath. "I'm sorry, sir, but I'm here to serve customers, not to play the piano." "Oh, but this is a customer request, isn't it?" Harrison shot back, now smirking provocatively. "Consider it an opportunity. Or are you afraid you're not good enough?" The jab hit hard. Alicia didn't want to cause a scene, but the indignity of the moment was undeniable. Before she could respond, a coworker stepped closer and whispered, "If you want, I can get the manager." "You don't have to do this." But Alicia shook her head. She knew that refusing could risk her job. And deep down, there was something else, something that made her hesitate. The restaurant's piano. A grand, polished instrument she had never touched. "All right, sir," she said finally. "I'll play for you." Alicia walked toward the piano, and the room grew even quieter. Harrison crossed his arms, clearly expecting something mediocre to affirm his superiority. She sat down on the bench and ran her fingers over the keys, feeling the coolness of the ivory. Remembering a piece she had composed years ago, back when the world felt full of hope, Alicia closed her eyes and began to play. The melody that filled the dining room was a stark contrast to the hostile atmosphere. Each note carried an emotion that seemed to transcend the restaurant's walls. There was sorrow, yes, but also strength, resilience, and beauty. People who had been indifferent to the scene before now paused to listen. Even those, like Harrison, who had anticipated mocking Alicia, couldn't deny the power of her music. When the final note faded, the silence was absolute. Patrons who had been engrossed in conversations and meals now stared at Alicia with a mix of awe and respect. Harrison, who had begun the night intent on belittling her, was speechless. His arrogant expression had disappeared, replaced by something he rarely displayed: vulnerability. Alicia rose from the bench, meeting his gaze directly. "I hope that was to your satisfaction, sir." He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. For the first time, Alicia felt like she held the power. Alicia had always known her place in the world was precarious. Born and raised in a small southern town, her childhood was a mix of joy and struggle. Her mother, Alicia Harper, worked long hours as a seamstress, often humming old gospel tunes while stitching clothes late into the night. Lorraine had instilled in Alicia a love for music. Their house was small and worn, but it had one prized possession, an old upright piano inherited from Lorraine's grandmother. That piano had been Alicia's escape. She taught herself to play by ear, creating melodies that could calm her brother's cries or brighten their mother's weary evenings. By the time Alicia was a teenager, her talent had become undeniable. She even earned a scholarship to study music in college. But when Lorraine's health began to deteriorate, Alicia had no choice but to stay home and take care of her family. Her dreams of performing on a grand stage faded into the background. Now, working at Magnolia Restaurant, Alicia lived in a world where she was constantly reminded of what she couldn't have. The grand piano in the dining room, polished to perfection, was a symbol of everything that felt out of reach. Across town, Harrison Vaughn lived in a different reality altogether. Born into wealth, he had inherited his family's successful real estate empire. Harrison's life was defined by privilege, but not without its shadows. His father, a ruthless businessman, had raised him with the belief that kindness was weakness. As a result, Harrison learned to build walls, using arrogance and power as his shields. But beneath the layers of bravado, Harrison carried his own regrets. His younger sister, Leela, had been a gifted artist. When their father dismissed her passion as foolish, Harrison stood by silently, too afraid to defy the man who controlled his future. Leela left home and never returned, and Harrison was left with the gnawing guilt of his inaction. On the surface, Harrison's life seemed perfect: lavish parties, expensive cars, and exclusive clubs. But deep down, he carried a void he didn't know how to fill. Perhaps that was why he sought control over others, especially those like Alicia, who reminded him of everything he lacked: authenticity, resilience, and a talent untethered by greed. After her stunning performance at the piano, Alicia tried to resume her shift, but the atmosphere in the restaurant had shifted. Patrons whispered among themselves, not about their usual business dealings, but about the waitress who had silenced the room with her music. In the kitchen, her coworker Nadia nudged her. "Girl, you've got everyone talking. Did you see Mr. Vaughn's face? He looked like he'd seen a ghost." Alicia forced a smile. "It's not like it changes anything. People like him don't see us as equals, no matter what we do." But Nadia shook her head. "Maybe. Or maybe you just gave him something to think about." Harrison, meanwhile, left the restaurant earlier than usual. As his driver navigated the city streets, Harrison replayed Alicia's performance in his mind. There was something haunting about the way she played, as though every note carried a story he couldn't quite grasp. It unsettled him, stirring emotions he had long buried. The next morning, Harrison called his assistant, Gina, into his office. "Find out more about that waitress from Magnolia," he ordered. Gina raised an eyebrow. "The waitress? Why?" "Just do it," Harrison snapped, though his voice lacked its usual force. Later that day, Gina returned with the details. "Her name's Alicia Harper, 24, lives in the West End, took care of her mother, who passed away a year ago, and she's raising her younger brother. Oh, and she's a pianist. A talented one, from what I hear." Harrison absorbed the information in silence. He felt a strange pull to learn more about her, though he couldn't explain why. Was it guilt for how he'd treated her? Or was it envy, the realization that her music had touched a part of him he thought was long dead? That evening, as Alicia walked home, she found herself deep in thought. Playing the piano at Magnolia had awakened something in her, a spark she hadn't felt in years. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a future where she could play professionally, not just for herself, but for audiences who truly appreciated her talent. As she turned the corner onto her street, a sleek black car pulled up beside her. The tinted window rolled down, and Harrison Vaughn's face appeared. "Miss Harper," he began, his tone unusually subdued. "I'd like to have a word." Alicia stopped, her instincts telling her to keep walking. But curiosity and a hint of defiance made her pause. "What do you want?" "An apology," Harrison said after a moment, "and a proposal." Alicia stood still on the cracked sidewalk, arms crossed, her expression a mixture of disbelief and skepticism. The last thing she expected was to see Harrison Vaughn again, let alone hear him utter the word apology. You want to apologize? She repeated, her voice laced with incredulity. Harrison, still seated in the back of his sleek car, nodded. Yes, for last night. I behaved poorly. I'd like to make amends. Alicia's brow furrowed. Men like Harrison didn't apologize, not sincerely at least. And the proposal? Harrison hesitated. I was impressed by your performance. You have talent, Miss Harper. Extraordinary talent. I have let's call it a business opportunity. Alicia shook her head, her skepticism growing. Let me guess. You want me to perform at some fancy party to entertain your guests? No, Harrison said quickly, surprising even himself with his urgency. Nothing like that. I want to sponsor you to help you develop your talent. Lessons, performances, whatever you need. Alicia's laugh was sharp and bitter. And why would you do that? Out of the kindness of your heart? Harrison sighed, his polished demeanor cracking slightly. I'll admit, kindness isn't usually my motivation. But let's just say your music left an impression on me. I see potential, and I want to help you realize it. Consider it an investment. Her instinct screamed at her to refuse, to walk away and never look back. But a small voice in the back of her mind whispered something else. What if this was her chance? What if, against all odds, Harrison Vaughn's offer could be the key to the future she'd always dreamed of? Still, Alicia wasn't about to make this easy for him. If you're serious, Mr. Vaughn, you'll put everything in writing. No strings attached, no fine print, just support for my music. Harrison smirked, a flicker of his old arrogance returning. I wouldn't expect anything less from you. I'll have my lawyer draft the paperwork. With that, he handed her a card with his number. Call me when you're ready. The window rolled up, and the car disappeared into the night, leaving Alicia standing in the glow of a flickering streetlight, clutching the card like it was a ticket to an unknown destination. The next day, Alicia confided in Nadia during their shift at Magnolia. So let me get this straight, Nadia said, her eyes wide. The same guy who tried to humiliate you is now offering to bankroll your music career? Sounds sketchy. It does, Alicia admitted. But what if he's serious? What if this is my one shot? Nadia leaned closer. Just be careful, okay? Men like him don't give without expecting something in return. Meanwhile, Harrison was grappling with his own doubts. Why had he made the offer? Was it guilt or something deeper? He told himself it was just business, that Alicia's talent could be a lucrative venture. But the truth was harder to admit. Her music had reached a part of him he'd long ignored, a part that yearned for something real. Over the next week, Alicia wrestled with her decision. Late one night, after hours of pacing, she finally called Harrison. I'll meet with you, she said. Their first official meeting took place in a neutral setting, a quiet cafe downtown. Harrison arrived punctually, his usual sharp suit replaced by something less formal, almost approachable. Alicia, dressed in her simple work clothes, felt out of place, but determined. Harrison slid a folder across the table. The agreement. Take your time to read it. Alicia opened it cautiously. The terms were clear. He would cover her lessons, provide a stipend, and arrange for her to perform at prestigious venues. In return, he would take a small percentage of her earnings, only after she began making a profit. It's fair, Harrison said, watching her closely. And you have full control. If you decide to walk away at any time, you can. Alicia studied his face, searching for ulterior motives. Why are you doing this, really? Harrison hesitated, then sighed. Because I've spent my life chasing things that don't matter. Money, power, status. And I'm starting to realize how empty it all is. Your music reminded me of something I've lost, something I want to find again. His candor caught her off guard. For the first time, she saw him not as the arrogant businessman from Magnolia, but as a man wrestling with his own demons. After a long pause, Alicia nodded. Okay, let's do this. Over the next few months, Alicia's life began to change. Harrison made good on his promises, arranging lessons with renowned instructors and booking her first performance at a small but prestigious venue. Despite her initial doubts, she found herself thriving under his support. But not everyone was pleased. Some in Harrison's social circle questioned his motives, whispering about his association with a waitress turned pianist. At the same time, Alicia faced criticism from some of her own community, who questioned her trust in a man like Harrison. The tension between their worlds began to mount, threatening to undo everything they had built. Alicia's first performance was a turning point. Held in a small but elegant concert hall, the event was attended by an audience of local music enthusiasts, a few influential critics, and, unexpectedly, Harrison Vaughn himself. He arrived discreetly, sitting at the back of the room, his usually commanding presence subdued as he watched Alicia take the stage. Her nerves were palpable as she sat at the grand piano, her fingers hovering above the keys. But as she began to play, the music flowed effortlessly, carrying the audience on an emotional journey. The applause that followed was thunderous, and for the first time in years, Alicia felt a glimmer of the future she had once dreamed of. After the performance, Harrison approached her backstage, his expression uncharacteristically warm. "You were incredible," he said simply. Alicia smiled, her usual guardedness momentarily melting. "Thank you for everything. I wouldn't be here without your help." But as the weeks went on, the complexities of their arrangement began to surface. In Harrison's world, his involvement with Alicia raised eyebrows. At a high society gala, a fellow businessman cornered him with a thinly veiled jab. "So, Vaughn," the man said with a smirk, swirling his whiskey, "I hear you're dabbling in philanthropy now, sponsoring waitresses with pianos." "Very noble of you." Harrison's jaw tightened, but he kept his composure. "She's a talented musician," he replied evenly. "That's all that matters." The whispers persisted, however, fueled by envy and prejudice. Some suggested he had ulterior motives. Others ridiculed the idea of someone from Alicia's background succeeding in their world. At the same time, Alicia faced judgment from her own community. While most celebrated her success, a few were wary of her association with Harrison. One evening, as she walked home from her piano lesson, an old family friend stopped her. "You're playing beautifully, Alicia," the woman said kindly, then hesitated. "But be careful. Men like that, they always want something in return." Alicia forced a smile, but the words stayed with her. The pressure from their respective worlds began to seep into their relationship. Harrison grew increasingly frustrated with the constant scrutiny, while Alicia felt the weight of expectations and doubts from all sides. Their interactions, once cordial and supportive, became strained. One evening, during a planning session for her next performance, Alicia finally snapped. "Why do you care what they think?" she demanded. "You're rich, powerful. Their opinions don't affect you." Harrison's response was sharper than he intended. "You think it's that simple? These people have been waiting for me to fail my entire life. You don't understand the stakes." Alicia's eyes narrowed. "And you don't understand what it's like to fight for everything, only to have people question if you deserve it." The room fell silent, the weight of their unspoken struggles hanging between them. Despite the tension, both realized they needed each other more than they cared to admit. One late night, Harrison surprised Alicia by showing up at her practice session. He sat quietly as she played, the music soft and introspective. When she finished, she looked at him, her defenses lowered. "Why are you here?" "Because I was wrong," he said simply. "About everything. You're right, I don't know what it's like to fight for what you have. But I want to understand." Alicia studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "And I don't know what it's like to carry the expectations of your world. But maybe we can figure this out together." From that night, their partnership took on a new strength. Alicia's next performance was a resounding success, attended by critics who praised her raw talent and emotional depth. Harrison, no longer concerned with the whispers, stood by her side, offering quiet but unwavering support. Their growing bond also began to shift the perspectives of those around them. Harrison's colleagues, initially skeptical, started to admire his genuine belief in Alicia's talent. Similarly, members of Alicia's community began to see Harrison not as a threat, but as someone who was genuinely invested in her success. But the challenges were far from over. As Alicia's fame grew, so did the stakes, setting the stage for the story's most pivotal moments. The night of Alicia's biggest performance yet was one of high stakes. and simmering tensions. The venue, a grand concert hall in the city's cultural district, was packed with critics, influential figures, and music enthusiasts. It was a defining moment, not just for Alicia's career, but for Harrison, who had staked his reputation on her success. Backstage, Alicia paced nervously, her hands trembling. She had performed before, but never on a stage of this magnitude. The whispers from both sides her community and Harrison's world lingered in her mind, threatening to break her focus. Harrison appeared in the doorway, his usually confident demeanor subdued. "How are you feeling?" "Nervous," Alicia admitted. "But I'll be fine. You'll be more than fine," he said firmly. "You've worked too hard for this." She nodded, grateful for his reassurance, though a part of her still questioned his motives. As the performance began, Alicia poured herself into the music, each note resonating with emotion. The audience was captivated, their initial skepticism melting into admiration. By the time she finished her final piece, the applause was thunderous, a standing ovation erupting from the crowd. Harrison watched from the wings, a rare sense of pride swelling in his chest. But as Alicia bowed, a commotion near the back of the hall caught his attention. Outside the venue, a group of protesters had gathered, holding signs and chanting slogans. Harrison's name was scrawled across many of the signs, alongside accusations of exploitation and racism. A journalist approached the building, waving documents and calling out for a statement from Harrison Vaughn. Backstage, Alicia was quickly ushered into a private room as security tried to manage the chaos. Harrison, meanwhile, was confronted by a reporter who thrust a microphone in his face. "Mr. Vaughn, how do you respond to allegations that your sponsorship of Alicia Harper is a publicity stunt to repair your image after questionable business practices?" Harrison's expression darkened. "No comment," he said sharply, pushing past the crowd. Inside, Alicia confronted him. "What's going on out there?" Harrison hesitated. "Someone dug up some old deals I was involved in. They're twisting it to make it look like I'm using you as part of some PR campaign." Alicia's jaw tightened. "Is it true?" "No," Harrison said, his voice steady. "But that won't stop them from spinning it into a scandal. This is how my world works. They'll tear me down, and they won't care who gets hurt in the process." Alicia stared at him, the weight of her own doubts pressing down on her. "Maybe this was a mistake," she said quietly. "I don't want to be a pawn in your battles." Harrison stepped closer, his tone urgent. "You're not a pawn, Alicia. You're the reason I'm trying to change. Don't let them take that away from us." The scandal quickly escalated, with tabloids running headlines that questioned both Harrison's motives and Alicia's legitimacy as a rising star. Online, anonymous comments ranged from support to vitriol, some accusing Alicia of selling out, others claiming she was being used. For days, Alicia avoided Harrison's calls, retreating into herself. The joy she'd felt after her performance was now overshadowed by doubt and frustration. One evening, Nadia found her sitting at the old upright piano in their neighborhood church. "You can't let them win," Nadia said gently. Alicia shook her head. "It's not just them. I don't know if I can trust him. What if he's just like the rest of them?" Nadia sighed. "Maybe he is, or maybe he's trying to be better. The question is, do you believe in him enough to find out?" Determined to get answers, Alicia showed up unannounced at Harrison's office. His assistant, Gina, tried to intercept her, but Alicia pushed past, finding Harrison staring out the window, a drink in his hand. "Why didn't you tell me about your past deals?" Alicia demanded. Harrison turned slowly, his expression weary. "Because I didn't think they mattered anymore. I was wrong. Were they as bad as they're saying?" He hesitated, then nodded. "Some of them, yes. I didn't care who got hurt back then. But that's not who I want to be anymore." Alicia studied him, searching for any sign of deceit. "You said I reminded you of something you lost. Was that just another line?" Harrison met her gaze, his voice quiet but firm. "No, your music. You made me see what I could be, not what I was. And I want to be better, Alicia. For you, for myself, for everything we've worked for." Their conversation marked a shift in their relationship. Alicia realized that while Harrison had flaws, he was genuinely trying to change. And Harrison, for the first time, allowed himself to be vulnerable, admitting his mistakes without excuses. Together, they faced the scandal head-on. Alicia released a statement addressing the public directly. "My music is my own, and my success is my own. No one gets to rewrite my story." Harrison followed with his own apology, acknowledging his past and pledging to support artists like Alicia without conditions. Alicia's public statement created a ripple effect that neither she nor Harrison fully anticipated. Her words were raw and defiant, striking a chord with people from all walks of life. Social media exploded with messages of support, transforming her into an unexpected symbol of resilience and authenticity. "Your music is your own, and so is your success." That line, in particular, was quoted and shared widely, giving voice to others who had faced similar challenges. But while Alicia's defiance garnered admiration, it also invited backlash. Some critics dismissed her as naive, accusing her of being manipulated by Harrison. Others attacked Harrison directly, dredging up his past deals and questioning his sincerity. The scrutiny was relentless. For Alicia, the days following her statement were overwhelming. Requests for interviews poured in, along with invitations to perform at prestigious events. But the spotlight came with new pressures. One evening, Alicia sat at her kitchen table, scrolling through articles and comments on her phone. She paused on a particularly cruel post, accusing her of using her sob story to gain fame. She felt a knot tighten in her chest. "I didn't ask for any of this," she said aloud, her voice trembling. Her brother, Marcus, who had been quietly doing homework nearby, looked up. "You didn't ask for it, but you earned it," he said simply. His words stayed with her. She couldn't control what people said, but she could control how she responded. For Harrison, the backlash was a test of his newfound resolve. He faced tense board meetings where his business partners questioned whether his association with Alicia was damaging the company's reputation. "You're turning this into a circus, Vaughn," one executive said during a heated meeting. "Stick to real estate and leave the charity work to someone else." Harrison stood his ground. "Alicia's success doesn't diminish this company. If anything, it shows that we can stand for something beyond profits. If you can't see that, maybe you're the one who's out of touch." Privately, however, Harrison struggled. He wondered if his involvement was truly helping Alicia, or if it had only made things harder for her. One evening, Harrison and Alicia met at a quiet cafe to regroup. The atmosphere was tense, but there was an unspoken understanding between them. They were in this together. "We need to stop letting them control the narrative," Alicia said, breaking the silence. Harrison nodded. "Agreed. But how?" Alicia hesitated, then smiled. Through music, together, they planned a charity concert with Alicia as the headline. The event would raise funds for underprivileged young musicians, showcasing not just Alicia's talent, but her commitment to giving others the opportunities she never had. The night of the concert was electric. Held in an open-air venue, the stage was adorned with simple but elegant decorations. People from all over the city attended, critics, fans, and skeptics alike. Alicia's performance was a mix of classical pieces and her own compositions. Her final piece, a new composition titled Resilience, was dedicated to anyone who's ever been told they couldn't. The music was powerful, each note carrying the weight of her journey. By the time the final note faded, the audience was on their feet, tears in their eyes, applauding not just the music but the story behind it. The concert marked a turning point for Alicia and Harrison. The funds raised exceeded expectations, allowing Alicia to establish a music scholarship program in her mother's name. Harrison, once seen as a cold and calculating businessman, began to earn respect for his role in supporting Alicia. While some still doubted his motives, many recognized the sincerity of his actions. Their bond deepened, though not without challenges. Alicia remained fiercely independent, ensuring that her success was always her own. Harrison, in turn, learned to support her without overshadowing her, stepping back when needed. As the weeks passed, the scandal faded into the background. Alicia continued to grow as a musician, performing at venues across the country and mentoring young artists. Harrison, inspired by the experience, began funding arts programs in underserved communities, using his wealth to make a tangible difference. Despite the initial turbulence, their partnership evolved into something neither of them had anticipated: a mutual respect and trust that transcended their differences. Alicia's career flourished in the months following the charity concert. Her unique blend of classical and contemporary music drew widespread acclaim, with critics praising her emotional depth and technical mastery. She performed at prestigious venues and collaborated with other artists, steadily carving out her place in the world of music. Despite her success, Alicia remained grounded. She often returned to her neighborhood to mentor aspiring musicians, holding free workshops at the local community center. Her scholarship program, named after her mother, Alicia Harper, became a beacon of hope for young artists from underprivileged backgrounds. Harrison's journey was less visible, but equally significant. The experience with Alicia had forced him to confront his past and reevaluate his values. He began using his wealth and influence to support causes that truly mattered: arts education, affordable housing, and small business grants. For the first time, Harrison felt a sense of purpose that went beyond profits and prestige. But his transformation wasn't without struggle. His business partners remained wary, and he faced occasional backlash from those who saw his philanthropy as insincere. One afternoon, during a meeting with his board, Harrison made a bold announcement. "I've decided to step back from day-to-day operations," he said. "It's time for someone else to take the reins. My focus is elsewhere now." The decision shocked his colleagues, but Harrison was resolute. He had realized that his true legacy would not be his wealth, but the impact he left behind. As Alicia's fame grew, so did the demands on her time and energy. Endless rehearsals, performances, and media appearances left her feeling stretched thin. For someone who had once played for herself alone, the weight of public expectations was overwhelming. One evening, after a particularly grueling day, Alicia found herself sitting at her piano, staring at the keys. For the first time in months, she couldn't bring herself to play. "I feel like I've lost something," she admitted to Nadia during a late-night phone call. "The music used to come from my heart, but now it feels forced." Nadia listened patiently, then said, "Maybe you need to take a step back. Play for yourself again. Forget the critics, the audience, just play like you used to." The advice struck a chord. Over the next few days, Alicia carved out time to play alone, away from the pressure and expectations. Slowly, she rediscovered the joy that had drawn her to music in the first place. Alicia and Harrison's paths had diverged somewhat as they focused on their respective journeys. But one evening, after months of sporadic contact, Harrison invited Alicia to dinner at a modest restaurant downtown. "I heard about your new scholarship recipients," he said, smiling as they sat down. "You're making a real difference. And I heard about the housing project you're funding," Alicia replied. "It's impressive." "You've changed, Harrison," he chuckled softly. "So have you." Their conversation was warm and easy, marked by the mutual respect they had built over time. They talked about their challenges and triumphs, reflecting on how far they'd come since their first encounter at Magnolia. At one point, Harrison grew serious. "Alicia, I owe you more than I can ever repay. You didn't just inspire me, you showed me who I could be." She smiled, her voice soft but firm. "And you helped me believe in myself again. So maybe we're even." A few weeks later, Alicia performed at Carnegie Hall, a milestone she had dreamed of but never thought possible. The audience was packed with luminaries from the music world, but Alicia felt calm as she stepped onto the stage. Her final piece of the night was a new composition titled Home, inspired by her journey and the people who had shaped it. As she played, the music captured the full spectrum of her emotions: sorrow, joy, struggle, and triumph. When the final note faded, the audience erupted into applause, the sound echoing through the hall. Alicia stood, taking in the moment, knowing she had truly arrived. From the balcony, Harrison watched with pride. He hadn't announced his presence, preferring to let Alicia shine without distraction. As he left the hall that night, he felt a deep sense of peace, knowing he had played a part in her success. Alicia and Harrison's relationship once fraught with tension and doubt, had transformed into a partnership built on trust and shared values. While they chose different paths, their lives remained intertwined, bound by the lessons they had taught each other. For Alicia, Harrison had shown her that even flawed people could change. For Harrison, Alicia had taught him the power of authenticity and resilience. Together, they had faced the world's skepticism and emerged stronger, not just as individuals but as allies in the pursuit of something greater than themselves. Alicia's triumph at Carnegie Hall solidified her place as a rising star in the music world. Offers from prestigious venues poured in, along with invitations to collaborate with renowned artists. But Alicia remained cautious, determined not to lose sight of her roots or her purpose. Back in her hometown, her scholarship program had expanded, and the community center where she once played was now bustling with young musicians eager to learn. Despite her busy schedule, Alicia made time to visit regularly, reminding herself why she had started this journey. Harrison, now semi-retired from his real estate empire, devoted his energy to philanthropic efforts. His newest project, a mixed-income housing initiative in Alicia's neighborhood, was nearing completion. The project faced challenges from bureaucratic hurdles to local skepticism, but Harrison was undeterred. At a public meeting about the housing initiative, a community leader stood up and addressed him directly. "Mr. Vaughn, people around here have seen promises come and go. Why should we trust you?" Harrison paused, meeting the man's gaze. "Because I know what it feels like to fail people, and I don't intend to do it again. This isn't about me. It's about what we can build together." The room was quiet for a moment before tentative applause began to spread. As Alicia prepared for her next big project, a nationwide tour, she found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her here. She had grown from a hesitant waitress to a confident performer, learning to navigate the complexities of fame and success. One evening, during a quiet moment at the community center, she sat at the old upright piano and began to play a familiar tune. The melody, one she had composed years ago, filled the room with warmth and nostalgia. "Still got it," Nadia said, leaning against the doorway with a grin. Alicia laughed. "It's funny. No matter where I go, this place feels like home." Nadia walked over and sat beside her. "It's because you've never forgotten where you came from. That's rare, Alicia. Don't lose it." Just as everything seemed to be falling into place, a new challenge emerged. A rival musician, Timothy Graves, accused Alicia of plagiarizing one of his compositions, claiming her piece Resilience was strikingly similar to his unpublished work. The accusation quickly gained traction, with social media buzzing and tabloids sensationalizing the story. For Alicia, the claims were both devastating and infuriating. "I've never even heard of him," she said to Harrison during a late-night phone call. "I believe you," Harrison replied, "but this is serious. We'll need to fight it head-on." Determined to clear her name, Alicia hired a lawyer and began working with a team to investigate the claims. Harrison offered his resources and connections, but Alicia insisted on taking the lead. "This is my fight," she said firmly. Through meticulous research, Alicia's team uncovered evidence that Timothy Graves had fabricated the claims. His so-called unpublished work had been altered after Resilience was publicly performed, and his accusations were part of an effort to gain attention for his struggling career. Alicia held a press conference to address the controversy. Standing at the podium, she spoke with clarity and conviction. "I have always believed in the power of music to bring people together," she said. This accusation was an attempt to tear that down. "But truth has a way of prevailing, and I am proud to say that my work is my own." Her words resonated, and within days, Timothy Graves issued a public apology. The ordeal, though stressful, became another testament to Alicia's strength and integrity. After the controversy subsided, Alicia invited Harrison to the community center to show him the progress made with her scholarship program. As they walked through the bustling space, Harrison looked around, visibly moved. "You've built something incredible here," he said. "I had help," Alicia replied, smiling. He shook his head. "You've always had it in you. I just gave you a little push." They paused in front of the old piano, the one where Alicia's journey had begun. She gestured to the bench. Play something, she said. Harrison laughed. I don't play. Well, maybe it's time you learn, she teased, sitting down beside him. She guided his hands to the keys, and together they played a simple tune, laughter filling the room. The scene at the community center marked a moment of unity and reflection for Alicia and Harrison. But it also hinted at the challenges yet to come as Alicia embarked on her tour and Harrison finalized his housing project. Their partnership, built on mutual respect and shared growth, had transformed them both. Now they were ready to face whatever came next. Alicia's nationwide tour was nearing its end, and the final performance was set to take place in her hometown. It was a symbolic choice, a way to honor the community that had shaped her and to celebrate the progress made through her scholarship program. Harrison's housing project was also nearing completion, with the ribbon-cutting ceremony scheduled for the same week. For both of them, these events represented the culmination of years of growth, struggle, and determination. The night of the concert arrived, and the atmosphere was electric. The venue, a newly renovated theater funded in part by Harrison's foundation, was packed. Friends, family, and supporters from all corners of Alicia's journey had gathered to celebrate her success. Backstage, Alicia sat quietly, her hands resting on her lap. The years of hard work, sacrifice, and resilience had led to this moment, and the weight of it all was both exhilarating and overwhelming. Harrison appeared at the doorway, a warm smile on his face. You ready? She nodded, standing to face him. I think I am. You've got this, he said, his voice steady. No matter what happens, you've already won. Alicia stepped onto the stage, greeted by a wave of applause. She took her seat at the grand piano, pausing for a moment to take in the faces before her. Then, with a deep breath, she began to play. Her set was a carefully curated mix of classical and original compositions, each piece telling a chapter of her story. But it was her final piece, a new composition titled Unbroken, that truly captivated the audience. The music was powerful, a reflection of Alicia's journey, its struggles, triumphs, and the resilience that had carried her through it all. Each note resonated deeply, filling the theater with an energy that left the audience spellbound. As the final chord faded, the audience erupted into a standing ovation. Alicia stood, tears in her eyes, and bowed deeply. The following day, the community gathered for the ribbon-cutting ceremony at Harrison's housing project. The development was a mix of affordable housing units, community spaces, and small businesses, designed to revitalize the neighborhood without displacing its residents. Harrison stood at the podium, addressing the crowd with a humility that was a far cry from the man he had once been. This project isn't about me, he said. It's about us, what we can achieve when we believe in each other and work together. When he cut the ribbon, cheers erupted, marking the beginning of a new chapter for the community. As the celebrations wound down, an unexpected challenge arose. A wealthy developer who had long eyed the area for commercial projects announced plans to build a luxury complex nearby, threatening to undo much of the progress Harrison and Alicia had fought for. The developer, Nathan Stokes, was a former rival of Harrison's, known for his aggressive tactics. At a public meeting, Stokes made his intentions clear. This city needs progress, he declared. And progress means investment, real investment. Harrison, standing alongside Alicia, responded firmly. Progress isn't about tearing communities apart. It's about building them up. The room erupted into applause, but Harrison and Alicia knew that the fight was far from over. Determined to protect her neighborhood, Alicia decided to use her growing platform to rally support. She organized a benefit concert, bringing together artists from across the country to raise awareness and funds to fight Stokes's development plans. The concert was a massive success, drawing national attention to the issue. Alicia's speech that night was heartfelt and impassioned. This isn't just about buildings or businesses, she said. It's about people, families, dreams. We can't let greed erase what makes this community special. Harrison, inspired by Alicia's leadership, worked tirelessly behind the scenes. Using his connections and expertise, he helped the community file legal challenges against Stokes's project, exposing unethical practices and securing the support of local officials. For Harrison, it was a moment of redemption. The man who had once prioritized profit above all else was now fighting to protect the very community he had once overlooked. In the end, their efforts paid off. Stokes's project was halted, and the community's future was secured. The victory was a testament to what Alicia and Harrison had built together, a partnership rooted in mutual respect, shared values, and the belief that change was possible. As the sun set over the neighborhood, Alicia and Harrison stood outside the community center, watching children play in the newly renovated park nearby. "You've come a long way," Alicia said, glancing at Harrison. "So have you," he replied. They shared a quiet moment, the weight of their journey settling into a peaceful silence. "What's next?" Alicia asked. Harrison smiled. "Whatever we want." Alicia laughed, the sound light and free. "Then let's make it something good." Months after the benefit concert and the victory over Nathan Stokes, the neighborhood was thriving. Alicia's scholarship program had expanded, now supporting dozens of young musicians who might never have had access to instruments or lessons. The community center was abuzz with activity, hosting workshops, performances, and events that brought people together in ways they hadn't seen in years. Alicia's career continued to soar. Her music was no longer just a personal expression, but a platform for change. Her compositions, rooted in her experiences, resonated with audiences worldwide. She balanced her professional commitments with her work in the community, refusing to let fame distance her from her roots. Harrison, too, had found his calling. His housing initiative became a model for ethical urban development, and he began collaborating with local leaders to replicate its success in other cities. Though his name carried less of the commanding weight it once did in the corporate world, it had gained something far more meaningful: respect. One quiet afternoon, Alicia sat at the old upright piano in the community center, running her fingers across the worn keys. The room was empty, save for the echoes of children's laughter filtering in from outside. She began to play, not for an audience, but for herself, a melody that felt both familiar and new. As the final note faded, she turned to see Harrison standing in the doorway. "Didn't mean to interrupt," he said with a grin. "You didn't," Alicia replied, smiling. "I was just thinking about how far we've come." Harrison stepped inside, leaning casually against the wall. "It's been a journey, hasn't it?" She nodded. "I used to think success was about reaching a destination, fame, recognition. But now I realize it's about the people you meet, the lives you touch along the way." "And you've touched a lot of lives, Alicia," Harrison said, his tone sincere. Later that evening, Harrison joined a small gathering at the housing project he'd spearheaded. As he watched families settle into their new homes, he felt an unfamiliar but welcome sense of fulfillment. The man who had once been defined by his ambition and arrogance now found purpose in the success and happiness of others. One resident approached him, shaking his hand firmly. "Thank you for believing in us," the man said simply. Harrison nodded, his voice steady. "Thank you for letting me be a part of it." As the days turned into weeks, Alicia and Harrison continued to walk their own paths, occasionally intersecting, but always supporting one another. Their partnership had grown into a friendship built on trust, mutual respect, and a shared commitment to making the world a little better than they found it. For Alicia, the future was full of promise. She was no longer the waitress at Magnolia, nor the young pianist yearning for a chance. She was a force of nature, using her talent and platform to inspire and uplift others. For Harrison, the future was a second chance, a redemption he had earned by choosing to stand for something greater than himself. Together, they proved that change was possible, even in the most unlikely of circumstances. Years later, a young boy sat at the grand piano in the community center, his small fingers hesitating over the keys. Alicia knelt beside him, offering an encouraging smile. "Just feel the music," she said softly. "It's not about being perfect. It's about telling your story." As the boy began to play, the notes filled the room, echoing through the space that had become a beacon of hope and creativity. From the back of the room, Harrison watched silently, a contented smile on his face. The boy's melody faded, and Alicia clapped. "Beautiful. Now, let's try again." Alicia and Harrison's journey reminds us of the transformative power of resilience, trust, and collaboration. Their story proves that even the most unlikely partnerships can lead to profound change when rooted in authenticity and purpose. As you reflect on their journey, consider the potential within your own community to create opportunities, uplift others, and challenge the status quo. Share this story with someone who inspires you or someone who might need a reminder that change is always possible. Together, we can compose a future where every voice, no matter how small, can be heard.